My name is Okko, Oulasvirta. I'm coming from Azure. I'm doing mostly nowadays DevOps consulting, and usually with Azure, but also, Visual Studio Team Services, since it's good for almost everything. Well, actually everything, I need to say. So I'm doing also on-premise stuff on DevOps side. Buffing again this one. So there's around 100 places for this DevOps bootcamp, and it's going to be a really interesting one. Microsoft has sponsored this with heavily, so it's going to be a good event here. It's Saturday, then again we have beers there, so have fun and have some beer. And today I'm going to talk about mobile DevOps with Visual Studio Team Services and App Center. So App Center is the DevOps for mobile platform from Microsoft, which has been done kind of on top of Hockey app, which has been bought by Microsoft 2 years ago. So what they have done now, they have created a new more streamlined version of Hockey app, I think, and it has a really nice integration with Visual Studio Team Services. And first of all, I'm talking about client releases and what kind of a environment we are talking about when we try to do a smooth DevOps pipeline with mobile development. First of all, we have to have, of course, server version control, and since Visual Studio Team Services provides Git, it's perfect for that. And in my case, I'm talking about today cross-platform development. So what you do usually in Microsoft space, you are using Xamarin for developing Windows Phone, Apple, and Android applications. And Xamarin is, of course, nice because it provides for us who are familiar with .NET and C# development. Xamarin can be development environment for us because of that. Something which is universal for all release pipelines. When you're doing version control, you have to safeguard your master branch. So that would be the branch where you do your releases. Usually you do some kind of a verification before you put anything to master. So what Visual Studio Team Services provides is this kind of a pull request mechanism where you can safeguard master so that you cannot push straight to master. You always need to do the development work in some other branch and then make a pull request from that branch to master. And with that pull request you can enforce, for example, integration builds, pull request builds that verifies that the code that should go to master is buildable, so you can actually build it with your changes integrated with the other guys in the team. Usually you also run some unit tests to verify when the build has run, and you have some kind of assemblies or binaries which you could use for deployment. You usually bombard those with unit tests after the during the pull request build. Also in the pull request, what you can do is you can enforce that you cannot put any code to master without some kind of association to work item. So afterwards you have some kind of idea why the code was changed. So you can associate, for example, to bug or user story. Well, you have to enforce something that you can know where is the specs, why we did these changes to the code. Also, you can have a code reviews enforced so that if I put a pull request, I require that at least 3 code reviews will be done by my team or some specialist from, for example, if we have some changes related to authentication, so perhaps we want to some enterprise architect who has this company's best knowledge about security, he needs to audit those changes. So we can have this kind of a workflows on the pull requests. Then when the pull request is done and the build is built, the CI build starts. The most important thing in CI build is that it needs to package the build assemblies to some kind of an artifact or deployment package that you can actually release. So in the CI build, you will do that. When it comes to mobile world, you most likely are going to, even if it's kind of a standalone application without any backend, you still usually have a different configurations from that. So something is that you distribute only for your developers, so that they can have some kind of a ready-made situation in the phone, and they can test fast, kind of simulate any connections, for example, Bluetooth connections to other devices or whatnot. So you can mock those out and have this kind of a simulation application. Then you usually have, for example, backend in Azure, and you have a development backend. So you want to have one application configuration that you can distribute also to maybe bit larger group, which are still heavily related to the development. And that configuration is always, without any changes to application that the user needs to do, is always connected to your development Azure backend. Then you might have other also alpha, beta production configuration packages, which can be also used for different purposes, so they can have perhaps different backends also. Anyways, with one commit going to master and having a good quality, you are always from that same source control source version, you are building multiple deployable packages for the mobile clients. Then, when the build has been done, it's publishing these, Visual Studio Team Services is talking about deployment artifacts. And those deployment artifacts go to Visual Studio Team Services, and then we have a release pipeline starting. So there's this is CI's continuous integration definition, build definition, and then there's a release definition. And you can have it triggered automatically or manually, or you can have different combinations that it has these environments inside. So in your release definition, you'll have always deployment environments. And with mobile development and App Center, Visual Studio App Center, the quite nice place to start is to deploy that simulation app, which can be run even though it has maybe back-end needs, or it has some connectivity to some IoT devices or something that you cannot have when you are just trying the new features which are related to the application, but not the connectivity to other apparatus that the production version would be using. So that simulation version is always going to be deployed to App Center, so Visual Studio App Center, and we can there run those user interface tests, so functional testing can be done against that application. It has, so that these UI tests are run on the App Center, they are actual devices. So they are this kind of a device in the cloud testing center So instead of always doing the same ritual with your, I don't know, maybe few tens or maybe 10 devices that your team has, you can have hundreds of devices running your smoke tests. So each time you make a change to code, you can be sure that at least the basic functionality is working. So this is something that if you think that you need to do this always by yourself and your test team, that would be really, really expensive. You know, people's time is always more expensive than time that you buy for this kind of a functionality. So,
sorry, you said testing and functionality testing. What kind of test cases you can run with that environment?
Yeah. For example, summary UI tests. This is a one framework. Another one is Appium. Those two are good for both. So you can, if you do some configuration when the test starts, it provides you which platform you are using currently. So you can have written one test, and you can actually code that test, of course, but you can have also Xamarin Test Recorder that can be used kind of tap, 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 and you have the structure of the test available, and then you can continue by coding to make it more better. At least when you start and you make a Visual Studio UI test project, it already creates you this simple app launches test. So kind of make sure that your application can be installed and it actually opens in each device. And what you can do here is you can have, of course, both. Well, there's Android and iOS platforms and all the versions there, and tablets and phones and even wearables, at least on Android. So something that you cannot do manually. You cannot have this amount of people testing and this amount of devices. So you have to have then thinking, are you going to test it are you going to support all these devices or not? If you do this, you don't have to guess. Then we can have again App Center distribution internally. So both Apple and Google Play, they have this kind of alpha and beta and test flight programs that you can test application without put it on public for everyone. But both of those, they have this validation routines that it might take. If you have an application going onto the Google Play, it might take tens of minutes, sometimes even to 2 days. So if you want to have a distributed application, say 50 times a day for the developer purposes, and not only for the current developer with the USB cable on the laptop, but distributed for all the team members, or maybe some pilot users inside your company, then you have this opportunity to use App Center distribution. So in that way, we can have the sanity check by people before we go to any app stores. And Visual Studio Team Services provides also in the release pipeline approval workflow. So you can have a post and pre-deployment and post-deployment approvals. So even though the deployment has been done and you have done the UI tests automatically, you have your team members, they have clicked through some testing, and perhaps this is already user acceptance test, the official one, then you have a Visual Studio Team Services test plan there, and you have green lights at test passed, test passed, test passed. And this is evidence for you, hey, we are in good shape for actual release to App Store, then we get some release manager or whoever is responsible for approvals to the Google stores and Apple. So then we just automate that one, so we can see visually from pipeline to deployment which version is in which environment, and we can have as I said, this closed testing channels in Google Play and in Apple iTunes, the test flight. And Visual Studio Team Service, what you can do, you can actually have a different release going to this channel. So for example, if we want to have this alpha app channel for us to be hooked with the development side of the Azure backend. So we know that this alpha application is always something that we will not publish eventually to production. The another way is just to have one application first going to alpha, then this is not any more deployments. When you switch to beta, you just promote it from alpha to beta. Good things about this is that the promoting application from different channels is much faster on the Google side. So you don't have to have this validation anymore, because it's already validated on this phase by Google. Key points on mobile build. Do always all the necessary application configurations from the same commit. So don't do like on the development branch something that goes to development. You can have that, but that's not going to be your official release pipeline. You can have your from dev branch something like temporary deployments, but when you start the actual releasing process, always make from the same source code version all of your configuration that goes through different channels. Modify, so that's why you cannot have anything hard-coded by the developers related to version code or version name or package naming or something like that. That is something that you should update during the Visual Studio Team Services build. So one of the tasks during the build is to manipulate app settings, for example. Very important thing in mobile development is version code. So those, for example, Google Play doesn't accept any deployments if the version code hasn't been incremented during the last deployment. So this is something that you also need to make sure that in your build increment it always some way. And one nice way to increment it is to use, there is these build time variables that Visual Studio Team Service provides. And for example, build ID is always something that is higher than the last time. So you can do that and use that as a one way. One way or another, you have to have an incremented version code. And if you are doing these different package channels, so you want to have a dev version for your application, you want to have a beta version, and that goes to some other backend, and then you have a production version. You need to have also different package names and labels, so that if you have those in same phone, you can have those in parallel, same time in the same phone. Otherwise, it's going to be conflict with the installation to that phone. Then you have to sign those. Both Apple and Google requires that you sign those apps that you are going to deploy. Do not put the certificates or any secrets to version control. You don't want to have your company's certificate files to be available to someone to see. You can have your developers have some kind of a temporary certificates for ad hoc deployments to the different purposes. But when you go to your official release pipeline, that is something that you don't want to give your developers. It's something that is put to Visual Studio Team Services. There is this secure file functionality where you can then, during the build time, you can use the certificate when you sign the application deployment package, but otherwise it's not shown to anyone. And then if you need to do also deployments from different branches, then if you want to have only one build and you don't want to have similar build created again and again and again and different build definitions, and you don't want to clone and copy tasks and keep those in sync manually, I suggest that you use this functionality which is called in the build definition you have a tasks, and those tasks have a conditions, should they be run or not. Or you can have a build phase, should the phase at all be run or not. And usually the default condition is that is the last task before this task, is it successful? If it's successful, then we are going to run this task. But if you select custom condition, you can have there's this syntax that you put there, and you can look at the documentation in, from VSTS that, for example, this syntax here is saying that, hey, last task was succeeded, and also the build source branch needs to be master. So I'm only running this task if the commit came from master branch. About Visual Studio Team Services build, I don't know if you have heard about it, but it now supports also Apple builds. So you don't have to buy any Mac in the cloud, or you don't need to have a private agent hooked with Mac Mini or something like that. You can just have a Microsoft Cloud build your Apple version of that application. Then when we go to the release side, so from build to release, make sure that you use automated UI test, at least the app launches, so that you can be sure that it's installable for multiple devices, multiple platforms, and multiple operation system versions. Then, of course, when you have already stabilized your UI, so it's not really heavily changing all the time, then it's time when you should start to build your UI test in a more complete way. Just a quick question about, has anyone done this UI testing automated way? Okay, that's a thing that you should really look. There's a 30-day evaluation period with all the devices that the App Center provides, and no limits to testing time. So you should really look at it and start by just doing your first Xamarin UI test in Visual Studio.
Can you give an example of that? I mean, what you're just saying about how would that go from like developer workflow point of view if you make like a UI test for the or something like installing the app? Do you know
What? Which?
For installing the application, like you know that if the installation goes through, what sort of activities does the developer need to do? And be like a rough explanation.
Yeah, I can show you. Let's see. I have this hello world level of, where is my, yeah. Oh, it's really small. Maybe I just duplicate. So this is the situation when you just create a Visual Studio Xamarin UI test, and this is kind of the starting point. It just creates you very, very simple snippet of code. Only thing that I have changed here is I have injected the application settings. As I said, I want to have also with my tests decoupled the configuration. So it's quite simple, as you see, but you know this is just the first step. What you can do that Xamarin test recorder to help with that experience, but then you need to have your application hooked. So what you can do is actually use the application and it records what you are doing there. But I'm not really, tester guy. I just show the and what's nice about this is that if we look at the actual test, so with this one I have used embedded resource for that app settings file, and it's going to read it, and when the build is creating the application deployment package, it's just going to overload stuff on that file. And this is the test. That's the only thing that I'm doing here. So it's just making sure it's going to start up, and when the app launches, it's going to take a screenshot what I saw after the app has been launched. So this is the most basic one, just to make sure you can install and run your application. Okay. Another thing to remember that if you have a multiple, actually here is a simple release definition. It has this visualization of that pipeline. So I have a App Center UI test first run, and you can see there's an icon of person there. So you can have here approval of that phase. When the deployment is otherwise ready, and all the task has been run, it's still kind of waiting for someone to approve it. Another one could be that you have a pre-deployment. So especially before you go, for example, to Google Play, you want to pre-approve it. So someone who has maybe marketing stuff needs to be done before we publish the next one. So all the other things that is not related to code or the quality of the code, but some other processes, you do that then, and then just deploy. The approval is going to generate an email for the persons that are responsible about it, and they get this, hey, start the approval from here. So if the person is someone who is not really familiar with Visual Studio Team Series or the development, you still can have that person in the chain giving that okay. So they just click the approval and have some kind of dialogue on to see and approve it, and it goes around to the next phase. Yeah, this notification here. Remember that for some technical reason it's really slow to test even simplest test. So the app launches, even though the actual test takes maybe 2 to 3 seconds, it's still going to initiate it by each device 5 minutes. So your test is always going to be at least 5 minutes with Android. With iOS, it's a bit better performance on the App Center side. But then again, it's a real device there. It's hooked by USB to some server there, and I don't know. They have to do something there. I don't know what, but it's a bit slow. If you wanted to have a faster, so if you want to think about 100 devices and 5 minutes, so 500 minutes, then you can scale it by have a more capacity. So how many devices you can be running at the same time. So that's the way you can have performance there. Pre-post and deployment approvals, and then pre-post and deployment gates. This is a really interesting one. So let's think about that. We have a deployment already done. It's working fine. Someone has tested it. We have a UI tests going on, but then we want to somehow, I don't know what we need to still validate. We have this deployment pre and post gates, and we can have, for example, well, very simple one. We can have a query to Visual Studio Team Services work item data. Is there still bugs related to this release that are still marked as open? So is there something that we have forgotten with this release? And if they have already fixed, but they haven't kind of updated the state, this is the last time you get your backlog cleaned. Or perhaps the back end of Azure, the new client, when we run the UI tests, it reported that there's like hundreds of 503s there on the back end, but the UI test didn't kind of catch those. But something wrong happened in the back end. We can have for example, Azure monitor alerts there. So it's, for example, going to 15 hours, it's going to be monitoring after the deployment Azure. And if there's something that we are worried about, then we get red failed deployment, and we are not going to go forward with this one before we investigate the reason. And as you can see, there's invoke Azure function, invoke REST API. So we are all Azure developers. So it's just your imagination what you can do with those kind of setups. To get started with App Center release in the Visual Studio Team Services side, what you need to do is there's an extension for it. So in Visual Studio Team Services, there's a marketplace for extensions. Most of them are free. And this is one of those. It's free extension. And I need to remind also that App Center itself is free to use. So you can use it for distribution, for example, freely. But if you want to do that UI testing automatically, that needs to be bought. Then you just create the service endpoint as you would do on Azure side also. So if you want to Visual Studio Team Services to deploy stuff to Azure Resource Management, you have to have this endpoint configured, and this is done also by App Center side. This is kind of a very blank release, this demo release, but this kind of a releases you can see in the App Center. So the users who are invited to App Center testing, they can go and download, and they can also have these alerts coming up that, hey, you have something to install now, and push a button and install starts. It's a manual deployment to the phone, so because it's not from the Google Play, for example, or Apple, you have to tweak Android to accept deployments from unofficial sources. And you can invite people with these kind of accounts to App Center, so they can start your if you're doing internal company apps, so Azure AD is the most convenient way. And this kind of a if you have a better release notes there, it's of course going to tell a lot about your install what happened during this release. So should they start their feedback with the new version. Then after that, there's Google Play release, and again there's a Visual Studio extension for Google Play. And what you need to do in the Google side is you go to Google Play and you create a service account that Visual Studio Team Service can be used. The details of that is used to configure the connection from Visual Studio Team Services to Google Play. Then you have, with that extension comes also some build and release tasks. Well, release tasks. So you can deploy application to alpha, beta, or production, or you can, if you have already deployed something to alpha, you can promote it to beta without doing another deployment. So you just promote already application which is in Google Play alpha. You can just push it to the beta and finally to production. And then, since Google Play provides this way that you deploy this release only to 10% of how, I don't know how Google even calculates that, but there is this way that you can say that, hey, only 10% release this time, and then you can roll out it finally 10, 20, 35. So you do deployment environment for each percent of rollout until it's 100. And of course there the deployment post gates are really important. You have to have some kind of a triggering, for example, Azure function which is going to look at the Google diagnostics about the application. When you put 10%, 20%, how it's going to affect for your application. Also another one is to use application insights monitoring and App Center diagnostics. Those are also monitoring possibilities for mobile. Yep, then I just quickly show that simple so what I have here, simple version that just builds hello world level Xamarin application. And if we look at from starting, actually, can I have a hands up who has done some build definitions in Visual Studio Team Services? So quite many. How about release definitions? Okay, I'll go quite fast now there. So first of all, as I said, the process has a possibility to have a private agents, but what's nice about now is there's a Mac OS agent also available, as it's also Linux, just to remind everyone. Oh. Then there is this task. If you find from the marketplace, Visual Studio Team Service marketplace, if you find Android versions, there is this task who has someone in Xamarin team has done those tasks, but usually I use PowerShell script to manipulate those application settings files and Android manifest files, so that I have my own control what I'm going to do. But this is kind of a fast way to start to do that. So it has some simple things, and it's going to use build ID to bump up the version. Then we are going to use the simple Xamarin Android build here, and I'm using Visual Studio test launch here. One thing that I have put here is that do not wait for test result this time, because I want it to be faster to go this build through. anyway, it's going to launch that. Then what we need to have also, we need to make sure that we can sign this application so it's also deployable to Google Play. And then I do another version of the application. So now I'm renaming it to the application with dev suffix here. So I get 2 versions of my application in this build with same code. And last thing is we just publish the artifacts so the release definition understand, hey, there's going to be something that I need to do deployments. So let's have a queue here. Let's queue this one against master. Usually this happens, of course, when you have put the pull request in and it's approved, then the master changes and this build triggers automatically. And we can look at what's happening there real time. It's going to, first of all, get and build agent for me. And start working with the build. Let it run there, and I can show the test runs. I did a big test run for 133 devices and 1 failed. So the test failed. So let's see, you can see it. It's a report of the files. So there's my neat cat clock. This is not, by the way, my design. Not my design. It's just from the GitHub. And there's the one which went wrong. Let's see if I get anything reasonable to see there. So we can go to logs. Okay, I get the exception details somewhere here, and if I would have a longer tests and more screenshots and more logged during the test, I would get it here. So I get much better understanding how it's going to run on the real devices, not only the one that I have used on my development. Okay, let's see if it's already still.
I have a question. So they are actually real devices?
Yeah.
Connected via USB cables to some...
Yeah, I assume, of course, it's USB cable there. Because I've seen somewhere, sometimes that there's this, the test has failed, and I see that from the screenshot that is asking that, should this device to be allowed to connect with USB or something like that. So there is glitches there, but usually it works quite fine. If you take a lot of devices, like hundreds of devices, usually get some kind of that error. So that's because of that, I would add a kind of a manual intervention task, which is also available in Visual Studio Team Services, so that someone who is responsible about quality can see that if the test has failed, they can go and investigate what's going on. You get the results back, but because I don't want to wait, for example, if it has 200 units tested and 5 minutes each of those, the build is really slow. So I just push the test going on, and after it's ready, I'll go to see if it's okay.
Have you kind of like defined the versions or the models that you want to
Yeah.
put it on? Like
You have a, yeah, let me show you There's device sets.
Okay.
Device sets. So I have this one Android. So the quicks just, is it going to, this could be used on the build. I'm running this during the build. And then I could have a larger group of devices during it's already in the release pipeline. So the build I want to be much faster because the developers want to see if this continuous integration is working. But if it's in the release pipeline, then I get load testing if on Azure side and so on. And perhaps much bigger device set. And what you can do if I have a new device set, you can have this kind of a, so you have a operation versions. Since this is an Android app now, it's only showing Android. Okay, tire level, I don't even know what's that. Then you can have for example, manufacturers, capabilities, how much memory, and CPU. So those are the filters that you can use to build quickly device sets for yourself. And of course, only tablets, only phones, so this way. Yep. I have now 1, 2, 3. How many I had? 2? 1. Myself also. Okay. Right. Do you have time still?
No.
What's?
No, you don't.
Okay. Hey, that was that. Maybe next time I'm going to talk about the backend then. So it's going to be the same thing, but ARM templates and deploying to Azure Resource Management. I think the gentleman in the back there was on the right-hand side more active. So, then it's yes, there. You have the first question, I think. Do you have a ticket in Tech Days?
Me?
Yes.
I don't have a ticket yet.
Okay. Do you want to go?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Come and claim your ticket here. Hey, thank you, everyone.